Good evening and welcome to the Government News Brief for Tuesday, May 24, 2016. In the news, the government is determined to enforce tax laws, plastic is recommended for use to avoid robbery, and 2 more days and Guyana turns 50. I am Azim Khan. Stay tuned for the details of these and other stories. Thank you for staying with us. This is the Government News Brief. Here are the details. The government will not flex in its enforcement of tax laws, says Finance Minister Winston Jordan. Here is that report.
Finance Minister Winston Jordan on Monday said there will be no flexibility in the enforcement of the tax and trade regulations.
If it's a regulation, it has to be enforced. If you want it removed, we can discuss it, okay? With a view to altering, change, whatever the case may be. But you cannot rethink the enforcement.
The minister was at the time responding to calls made by members of the private sector for government to rethink the enforcement of some regulations.
The problem we have, these regulations were not being enforced. So it allowed an unfair advantage to those who benefited. When you begin to enforce the regulation, all right, the people begin to...
Minister Jordan explains that the failure to enforce regulations gives non-compliant businesses an unfair advantage in trade and puts legitimate businesses at risk of closure. Minister Jordan points out that the Guyana Revenue Authority is on a countrywide exercise to ensure everyone comes into the tax net.
It's a countrywide measure aimed at getting people to legitimize themselves. You know, we can't on the one hand ask for legitimacy to take a foothold, and at the same time, when those who will be affected, we seek to have this, leave them, no man, and so on. If everybody comes into the net, just think about how we can reduce overall taxes generally, if everybody comes into the net.
Under the previous administration, there were calls for a level playing field in the administration and enforcement of the tax laws. The coalition government is on a drive to shrink the size of the informal economy. Kidaki Amsterdam for Government News Brief.
The use of plastic for business transaction is being recommended to reduce incidents of robbery. Details in this Paul McAdam report.
Minister of Public Security Kamraj Ramjatan is calling on business persons to carry less cash and use credit or debit cards. This, he says, will be a major deterrent to crime.
We right now in Guyana walk around with millions and millions of dollars. Most of the big robberies that have occurred is because inside of the car in some bag got 10 million, 5 million, $3 million. We have to go plastic. But a lot of people, we have to go plastic, but a lot of people do not want to go plastic, and I understand now from the Ministry of Finance and the Commissioner himself, because they want to avoid tax payments. That is why they want big cash to go around with and deal with and all of that.
The minister noted that those who avoid their tax commitments are acting illegally.
That is another crime being committed. So it's like a double whammy we get. You're avoiding taxes plus you're getting robbed. And then you put the police force and the prison and everything come into activity. We feel that if we start getting some businessmen and so on, they can help. Of course, they can also help, and we in the government level can help if, of course, we start bringing in these duty-free video cameras that can be placed in and around homes and so on. That can help in the situation.
Government is committed to examining various ways to best utilize its resources to fight crime. This has seen increased budgetary allocations for rehabilitation of police stations and outposts, more equipment and training for ranks, future salary adjustments, and a hands-off approach politically to law enforcement efforts. Paul McAdam, Government News Brief.
Residents of Barra Bheema and nearby communities in Region 1 can now travel with ease. Details in this report.
The Barra Bheema Region 1 road, that has been in a deplorable state for years, has been transformed. This is a fulfillment of a promise by Minister within the Ministry of Public Infrastructure, Annette Ferguson, earlier this year.
I went to Mabaruma to inspect, infrastructural works to be done. And surprisingly, this particular road in Barra Bheema, and I can recall under the previous administration, they said that works were actually done to address this particular area. But, I mean, being on the ground, I see things differently.
The landscape near the roadway has experienced flooding for years. Works by the regional administration could not remedy the situation. A $21 million contract was awarded to Joshi Construction to rebuild the roadway, but after about 70% completion, the company ran out of money and was fired. The road remained in the poor state until the regional administration commenced works recently.
They could not have got from one end to the other end. I mean, I had the experience because I was on the ground. In order for me to get from the other end of the road, I had to use a makeshift bridge that was erected by the citizens or the residents. And what happened is that the road apparently had from, sinking, and you had water settling there. The water was actually eating away the stuff from off its surface.
The minister explains that in order for the ministry to make informed decisions, the ministers must go out into the field and do inspections to fully understand the situation on the ground.
I was able to negotiate with my senior minister. I said we need to address the plight of the residents here in Barra Bheema, and we were able to have that fixed. We got the estimate through the region, and we had the monies sent as warrant to the region. So the people, they're happy now.
In keeping with the government's policy to facilitate greater connectivity between the coastland and the hinterland, government embarked on a program to rehabilitate hinterland roads. Renetta LaFleur for the Government News Brief.
Guyana has achieved a major breakthrough with regard technical and vocational education. Here are the details.
The Technical and Vocational Education Program certificate is now being accepted throughout the Caribbean. Chief Education Officer Dr. Sams explains.
Guyana has actually made a major milestone in relation to its approval that it just received to actually award the Caribbean vocational qualifications. That in and of itself has really placed us in good stead in relation to the qualifications framework that all of our young people can now work towards.
The Caribbean Vocational Qualification places emphasis on developing skills and knowledge in a particular field of work. Additional work has been done to make students in secondary schools aware of the options they have after leaving school. Sam says that this will be done through the Secondary Competency Certificate Program.
We have also done quite a bit of work to streamline the offerings so that the young people in secondary schools are very aware of the potential pathways they can embark on through our Secondary Competency Certificate Program, which is TVET based, and the linkage with that and the more academic CSEC routes. So individuals now are finding it more, a seamless kind of transition between the two.
The Secondary Competency Certificate Program is designed to provide students with skills to support national development. The Chief Education Officer reiterated government's commitment to improving the quality of education that students receive. For the Government News Brief, Isaiah Braffett.
President of Conservation International says now is the time for Guyana to capitalize on various green economy initiatives. Here are the details.
Guyana also has great potential in ecotourism and cultural heritage promotion, among others. Dr. Russell Metimar, President of Conservation International, encourages the country to think big in conservation efforts. He says that it is opportune that Guyana take advantage of the many initiatives being offered to benefit its green economy. One such initiative is the natural capital accounting. This process underpins the future of green economy, says Dr. Metimar.
If you wanted, we could bring in the team that's working in both in Washington and in Peru to show how this is actually working. I think something is already underway here, right?
Natural capital accounting is the measurement and valuation of nature's benefits in terms of ecosystem goods and services. It helps policymakers and decision makers better understand that economic development is dependent on natural resources. There is also a big opportunity for Guyana to capitalize on REDD+, Dr. Metimar says.
A paper came out that said that rainforests, before we were using 30%, this said rainforests are 50% of the solution to climate change. Think about that. 50% of the solution to this global issue of climate change could be in conservation, restoration, maintenance of rainforest.
Reducing emissions from deforestation and forest degradation, or RED, is an effort to create a financial value for the carbon stored in forests, offering incentives for developing countries to reduce emissions from forested lands and invest in low-carbon paths to sustainable development. Meanwhile, Conservation International pledged $100,000 to assist the government of Guyana to meet its commitment under the UN Convention on Biodiversity. Signatories of the UN Convention on Biodiversity are expected to set aside 17% of terrestrial area and 10% of marine areas for biodiversity conservation by 2020. For the Government News Brief, I'm Tiffany Rogers.
Today, May 24, 2016, brings us closer to the celebrations of the much-anticipated 50th Independence Anniversary of Guyana. All Guyanese are invited to attend the official flag-raising ceremony to be held tomorrow evening at Darwin Park. The activity commences at 10 p.m. Come out and let's be a part of history. That concludes today's edition of the Government News Brief. The details of these and other stories can be found on GINA's website. We do encourage you to subscribe to our website and YouTube channel. You can also like and follow us on Facebook to be updated as the news unfolds. Remember, we are 2 days away from our Independence Jubilee celebrations. Stay connected to GINA as we bring you updates on the activities for the grand celebrations. Do join us again tomorrow for another edition of the Government News Brief. Thank you for watching.